What if the smallest act of defiance on Christmas Eve could unravel 30 years of silence? Margaret Fletcher stood in her garage on December 23rd, staring at a cardboard box marked Christmas 1994 in her late husband's handwriting. The air smelled of motor oil and cold concrete. Her fingertips hovered over the dusty flap. Inside that box lived an ornament she'd sworn never to hang again, a delicate glass snowflake her daughter Emily had made in fourth grade, the year everything fractured. The afternoon light slanted through the garage window, catching dust motes that danced like tiny ghosts. Margaret was 72 now, her hands spotted with age, her silver hair pulled back in the same practical bun she'd worn for decades. Tomorrow, Emily would arrive from Seattle with her husband and two kids Margaret barely knew. They'd exchange pleasantries over honey-glazed ham and green bean casserole, just like the past 5 Christmases since Richard died. Polite, distant, safe. She'd already decorated the living room. The artificial tree stood perfectly symmetrical near the bay window, adorned with matching gold and red ornaments from Target, impersonal, coordinated, nothing that whispered of memory or mistakes. The house in suburban Cleveland looked like a catalog spread, garland draped over the mantel, cinnamon-scented candles on every surface, a wreath on the front door with a cheerful plaid bow. But this box was chaos. Margaret lifted the flap. The smell of old newspaper and pine needles long dead rushed out. There, nested in tissue paper, the snowflake caught the light. 6 crystalline points, hand-painted with silver glitter that had mostly flaked away, leaving ghost trails. Emily had been 9 when she meted at the church craft fair, her small tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully squeezed glue from a bottle. Margaret could still see her daughter's gap-toothed smile when she'd presented it, so proud, so certain her mother would treasure it forever. That was November 1994. By December, everything had changed. Why had she kept it? Why pack it away instead of shattering it, burying it, letting it disappear like she tried to do with the guilt? The garage suddenly felt too small. Margaret set the ornament on the workbench and walked back into the house, closing the door firmly behind her. She had cookies to bake, traditions to maintain, a performance to rehearse. The kitchen was Margaret's domain, white subway tile backsplash, granite counter she'd picked out after Richard's funeral, everything gleaming and orderly. She pulled out her grandmother's recipe for snickerdoodles, the index card stained and soft from decades of use. Her grandmother, Rose, had made these every Christmas in her tiny kitchen in Akron, singing off-key carols while Margaret sat on a stool licking cinnamon sugar from her fingers. Rose had died in 1989, but her voice still echoed sometimes. Sugar and spice make everything nice, but it's the bitter that makes you remember Maggie. Margaret creamed butter and sugar with her standing mixer, the rhythmic whir filling the silence. Through the window above the sink, she could see the Kowalski house next door, their inflatable Santa wobbling in the December wind. They had grandkids over constantly, squealing, running, alive. She'd hear them through the walls sometimes, their chaos a reminder of the silence in her own home. She shaped the dough into balls, rolled them in cinnamon sugar, pressed them flat with the bottom of a glass. Mechanical, precise, the way she'd learned to live. But her mind kept drifting back to that garage, to 1994. Emily had been in the church Christmas pageant that year. She was supposed to be an angel. White sheets, tinsel halo, the whole production. Margaret had been on the planning committee, as always, organizing, controlling, making sure everything reflected well on the Fletcher family. Richard was up for partner at his law firm. Image mattered. Perfection mattered. The night before the pageant, Emily had come downstairs holding the snowflake ornament. "Can we put this on the tree, Mom? Front and center." Margaret had been arranging the professionally decorated tree, every branch just so. The ornament was crude, childish. It clashed with the elegant theme she'd spent hours perfecting. "Maybe on the back, sweetie, where you can see it from your special angle." Emily's face had fallen. "But I made it for everyone to see." "The tree looks beautiful as it is, Em. We don't want to crowd it." Such a small thing, such a nothing moment. Except Emily was 9, and 9-year-olds don't understand about partner tracks and impressions and keeping up appearances. She'd placed the ornament on a back branch hidden behind fuller boughs and gone to bed without another word. The next day, at the pageant, Emily forgot her lines, froze on stage in front of 200 people. Margaret had watched from the 3rd row, her face burning, feeling the weight of every glance, every whispered comment. "That's the Fletcher girl. Margaret's always so organized. What happened?" After, in the church parking lot, Margaret had said words she'd spent 30 years trying to forget. "If you'd focused on practicing instead of silly crafts, this wouldn't have happened." Emily, still in her angel costume, had looked up at her with eyes too old for 9. "You hated my ornament." "Don't be dramatic. I just wanted the tree to look nice." "You always want everything to look nice, even me." Margaret bent down, gripped Emily's shoulders too tight. "We do not make scenes in public. Get in the car." They'd driven home in silence. Emily had gone straight to the tree, taken down the snowflake, and handed it to Margaret. "Here, now it's perfect." Then she'd walked upstairs to her room and closed the door. The oven timer shrieked, jolting Margaret back. She pulled out the cookies, golden-edged and perfect. They smelled like nostalgia, like forgiveness she'd never earned. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. The digital clock on her nightstand blinked 2:47 a.m. Richard's side of the bed remained cold and untouched, the way it had been for 5 years. She used to sleep diagonally after he died, claiming space, but lately she'd migrated back to her side, as if his ghost still required room. Richard. He'd been the mediator, the bridge between Margaret's rigidity and Emily's wild heart. After the pageant incident, he tried to smooth things over, bought Emily a new craft kit, told Margaret to ease up, but Margaret had doubled down instead. If Emily wanted to be part of this family, she needed to learn standards, excellence, the Fletcher way. Over the years, the small fractures had compounded. Margaret critiquing her report cards, B+ isn't good enough, her college choice, art school instead of pre-law, her boyfriend-turned-husband, David, a freelance photographer, wasn't a real career. Each comment a tiny chisel, widening the gap. Emily had moved to Seattle after college, visited dutifully for holidays, called every few weeks, but the warmth had drained away, replaced by a cordial distance that felt like grief. When Richard died suddenly of a heart attack at 67, Emily had flown home immediately. She'd held Margaret while she sobbed, organized the funeral, stayed for 2 weeks. For a brief moment, Margaret had thought maybe this tragedy would bring them back together. Instead, it had just clarified how much she'd lost. Emily still visited for Christmas, but they moved around each other like choreographed dancers, polite, careful, never touching the raw places. Margaret would admire photos of her grandchildren, Lily and Connor, and ask surface questions about Seattle. Emily would compliment the decorations, eat the snickerdoodles, and leave without ever asking Margaret how she really was. Neither of them mentioned the pageant, the ornament, the 30 years of small cruelties disguised as standards. Margaret rolled onto her back and stared at the ceiling. Today, technically, she'd get up, finish the cleaning, set out the good china, she'd hug Emily at the door and smile at David and pretend she knew anything real about her grandchildren beyond their ages and favorite colors. They'd eat dinner, open presents, and maintain the fiction that they were a family instead of acquaintances bound by blood. The performance was exhausting, and the worst part, Margaret knew exactly whose fault it was. Christmas Eve morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of snow. Margaret moved through her routine on autopilot, coffee, toast, last-minute vacuuming, checking that the guest rooms had fresh towels. Emily's family would arrive around 4, 6 hours to prepare her armor. But as she wiped down the kitchen counters for the 3rd time, her eyes kept drifting to the garage door. That ornament, still sitting on the workbench where she'd abandoned it. She'd avoided the box for years because opening it meant confronting what she'd done. Not just the pageant incident, but the entire architecture of control she'd built around her daughter. Margaret had convinced herself she was teaching Emily resilience, high standards, how to succeed in a world that demanded excellence for women. Really, she'd just been afraid. Afraid of mess, of imperfection, of love that couldn't be managed or arranged into neat compartments. Rose, her grandmother, had loved messily. Her house had been cluttered with craft projects and half-read books and grandchildren's drawings taped everywhere. She'd served dinner on mismatched plates and laughed when the gravy spilled. Margaret had found it chaotic as a child, but now she'd give anything to feel that kind of warmth again. The doorbell rang at 3:47 p.m. Margaret checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, blouse pressed, lipstick perfect, smile ready, and opened the door. Emily stood on the porch, snowflakes just beginning to fall around her. At 39, she looked so much like Richard, same hazel eyes, same slight build, but with Margaret's determined chin. She wore a vintage peacoat and hand-knit scarf, her dark hair streaked with a few early grays. Behind her, David held the hands of 2 kids Margaret recognized from photos but barely knew in person. "Mom?" Emily leaned in for a brief hug, the kind you'd give a distant aunt. "Emily, you made good time." Margaret stepped back, gesturing them in. "And look at you two. Lily, Connor, you've grown so much." The kids smiled shyly. Lily had Emily's eyes, David's darker coloring. They were beautiful and strange to her, these children of her child. "The house looks lovely," David said, ever the diplomat, as he hauled in suitcases. "Smells amazing, too." "Just snickerdoodles, the hams for tomorrow." They moved through the familiar choreography, coats hung, bags carried upstairs, small talk about traffic and weather and the flight delays that had thankfully not materialized. Margaret offered hot chocolate. The kids accepted eagerly. Emily declined. "I'm fine, thanks," and stood awkwardly in the living room, taking in the perfect tree, the perfect decorations, the perfect absence of soul. Margaret saw her daughter's gaze linger on the tree, and something flickered across her face. Not quite sadness, not quite resignation, something older and deeper. "When should we do presents?" Emily asked. "Tonight or tomorrow morning?" "Whatever works best for the kids." "Tonight would be good," David said. "They've been vibrating with anticipation since Denver." Lily tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mom, can we put up our ornaments, the ones we made?" Emily glanced at Margaret, and in that split-second look, 30 years of history compressed into a single question. "Will you reject these too?" Margaret's throat tightened. "Of course. Let's see them." Emily pulled out a gallon Ziploc bag containing 3 homemade ornaments, popsicle stick frames with school photos, salt dough painted in bright primary colors, one particularly ambitious attempt at a pipe cleaner reindeer. They were gloriously imperfect, clearly made by small hands, more concerned with joy than precision. They were beautiful. "The tree's a little full," Margaret heard herself saying, the old script activating. "Maybe we could—" She stopped. Emily's face had gone carefully blank, a mask Margaret recognized because she'd taught her daughter to wear it. "Actually," Margaret said, changing course, feeling something crack open in her chest, I think they'll look perfect right here in front. Let me make space." She reached into the gold and red ornaments, removed 3 of the impersonal spheres, and stepped back. Emily stared at Margaret, something shifting behind her eyes. "Really?" Lily asked, bouncing. "Front and center?" "Front and center," Margaret confirmed. "That's where they belong." The kids hung their ornaments with careful pride, while Emily watched, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Margaret felt David observing her with what might have been surprise or approval. She'd always been the difficult mother-in-law, the one who critiqued and controlled. She could read it in the way he usually steered conversations away from conflict. After the ornaments were up, after the kids had been distracted with coloring books in the den, Emily followed Margaret into the kitchen under the pretense of helping with dinner prep. They worked in silence for a few minutes, Margaret checking the ham in the slow cooker, Emily washing mugs, until Emily spoke quietly. "You didn't have to do that." "Do what?" "Make space for their ornaments." Emily dried her hands on a dish towel, not looking at Margaret. Margaret paused, her hand on the refrigerator door. This was the closest they'd come to honesty in years. She could deflect it, smooth it over, maintain the performance, or she could tell the truth. "I was wrong," Margaret said simply, "about a lot of things." Emily turned, surprised. "What?" "The tree, the pageant, all of it." Margaret's voice felt rusty, like machinery long unused. "I prioritized the wrong things, Em. I made you feel like you weren't enough." Emily's eyes widened, then narrowed, protective walls snapping up. "We don't have to do this now. It's Christmas Eve." "When else would we? We've been avoiding it for 30 years. "Because it doesn't matter anymore. It was a long time ago." "It matters to me," Margaret said, and surprised herself with the steadiness in her voice. "It should have always mattered to me." Emily set down the dish towel with too much precision, her movements controlled. I don't know what you want me to say." "Nothing. I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to know I see it now. What I did. Who I was." Margaret stepped closer, close enough to see the faint lines around her daughter's eyes, evidence of laughter and stress Margaret had missed. "I'm sorry, Em. I'm so deeply sorry." For a long moment, Emily just stared at Margaret. Then her face crumpled, not dramatically, but in the subtle way of someone whose defenses have finally exhausted her. "Do you know what the worst part was?" Emily's voice cracked. "It wasn't that you hated my ornament. It was that you taught me my love wasn't enough, that everything I offered had to be refined, perfected, made acceptable before it deserved space in your life." The words landed like stones. Margaret absorbed each one, feeling their weight. "You're right," she whispered. "God, Em, you're right. You spent years trying to be perfect for you, perfect grades, perfect comportment, perfect daughter, and it was never enough. So eventually I just stopped trying, moved away, built a life where I didn't have to audition for acceptance." "I know." "Do you?" Emily's hazel eyes bore into her. "Because you're still doing it, Mom, still curating everything, controlling the narrative, making sure nothing messy leaks through. Even this apology feels rehearsed." That stung, mostly because it was true. Margaret had been preparing speeches in her head for years, carefully worded explanations that would make her look better, hurt less. But Emily didn't need another performance. "I don't know how to do this," Margaret admitted. "Be real, be messy. I'm 72, and I've spent my whole life building walls. I don't know how to take them down." Something softened in Emily's expression. "I don't need you to be someone else, Mom. I just need you to see me, actually see me, not the version you wanted me to be." "I do see you," Margaret said. "I see a woman who built a beautiful life despite having a mother who made her feel inadequate. I see someone who's creative and brave and warm, all the things I wish I'd been." Emily's breath hitched. "You're proud of me?" "So proud. The art school, the photography career, the way you parent those kids with so much freedom and joy. Em, you're everything I wish I'd been." A tear slipped down Emily's cheek. She brushed it away angrily, then laughed, a wet, broken sound. "This is a lot to process on Christmas Eve." "I know. Bad timing. Maybe the only timing." Emily wiped her face with her palms. "This is 30 years of hurt. It doesn't disappear with one conversation." "I understand. But maybe," Emily looked back at her, "maybe we can actually start, not just pretend." Margaret nodded, not trusting her voice. Emily left to tend to her kids, and Margaret stood alone in the kitchen, feeling simultaneously hollowed out and strangely lighter, as if she'd been carrying a weight so long she'd forgotten it was there until it lifted. They made it through dinner with surprising ease. The kids chattered about school and friends and the new puppy their neighbor had adopted. David told stories about his latest photography project, a series on Seattle's changing waterfront. Emily asked about Margaret's book club, and for once, Margaret answered honestly about the petty politics and the way Mrs. Henderson always spoiled the endings. The ham was perfect, the green bean casserole exactly right, the rolls golden. But Margaret barely tasted any of it. She was too busy watching Emily interact with Lily and Connor, the gentle way she corrected without shaming, the inside jokes, the ease. This was what Margaret had missed by being too rigid to simply love. After dinner, they opened presents in the living room. Margaret had bought thoughtful but safe gifts: art supplies for Lily, Legos for Connor, a nice scarf for Emily, a photography book for David. She'd spent hours selecting them, determined to get it right, but terrified of getting it wrong. Emily and David gave her a framed photo of the whole family, taken at Pike Place Market in Seattle, everyone laughing as a seagull dive-bombed David's fish and chips. It was chaotic and imperfect and real. "It's wonderful," Margaret said, and meant it. But as the evening wound down, as the kids grew drowsy and David herded them upstairs for baths and bedtime, Margaret felt the conversation from earlier pressing on her. There was more to say, more to offer than just words. She waited until Emily was alone, curled on the couch with the last of her wine, staring at the tree. Margaret sat in the armchair across from her. "Em, there's something I need to show you." Emily glanced over, curious. "Now?" "In the garage. Will you come with me?" Emily followed her through the kitchen, both of them shrugging on cardigans against the cold. Margaret flipped on the garage light. The cardboard box still sat where she'd left it, the snowflake ornament resting on the workbench beside it. Emily stopped when she saw it. "Is that the ornament you made, 1994? Emily stepped closer, picked it up with trembling fingers. The glass caught the fluorescent light, sending tiny refractions across the concrete. Most of the glitter had flaked away, but the basic structure remained intact. 6 delicate points, slightly lopsided, made with a child's earnest love. "You kept it," Emily whispered. "I packed it away after that Christmas. Couldn't bear to look at it, couldn't bear to throw it away. It's been in this box for 30 years. Emily turned the ornament slowly, examining it from every angle. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because I want to hang it, on the tree, front and center, where it always should have been." Emily's eyes filled. "Mom, I know it doesn't fix anything. I know one symbolic gesture doesn't erase 30 decades of damage, but I need you to see that I'm trying, that I want to change. Emily clutched the ornament to her chest, and for a moment she looked 9 again, gap-toothed, hopeful, desperate to be seen. It's so fragile. After all these years, I thought for sure it would have broken. Surprisingly resilient, like you. Emily laughed wetly. I broke plenty, Mom. You just didn't see it. I broke and then I learned to hide the pieces. I'm sorry I made you have to do that. They stood in the cold garage, breath misting, the weight of lost years hanging between them. Then Emily held out the ornament. Let's hang it together, both of us. They returned to the living room where the tree still glowed softly. Emily cleared a space right at eye level in the very front, and together they hung the snowflake. It looked absurd among the coordinated gold and red spheres, this glittery, lopsided relic of childhood, but it also looked exactly right. Margaret stepped back. It's perfect. It's not, but maybe that's the point. They stood side by side, studying the tree. Margaret could hear David upstairs reading bedtime stories, Connor's sleepy interjections, Lily's giggle, the sounds of a family being real together. I spent so many years trying to control everything, Margaret said quietly. After my parents died when I was 17, I think I just decided chaos was the enemy. If I could keep everything ordered, nothing bad would happen. But bad things still happened. Yes, and I lost you in the process of protecting you from pain I couldn't have prevented anyway. Margaret glanced at her daughter. You asked earlier if I really see you. I do, Em, and I see that you gave your kids what I couldn't give you, permission to be imperfect, to make messes, to take up space. They're good kids. They're great kids because they have you. And David, he's patient with me when I spiral, when I start trying to control things because I learned it from, trailed off. From me. It's okay to say it. Emily nodded. Therapy's helped. Understanding where my perfectionism came from, why I'm so terrified of rejection. It's all connected to that Christmas, to years of feeling like I had to earn your love. Margaret's heart ached. You never had to earn it, Em. It was always yours. I just didn't know how to show you without trying to shape you into something I thought the world would accept. The world accepted me fine. You were the one who couldn't. The truth of it settled heavily. Margaret didn't argue, didn't deflect. She just nodded. They sat on the couch together, not quite touching, but closer than they'd been in decades. The tree lights cast soft colors across their faces. Outside, snow had begun falling in earnest, blanketing the Cleveland suburbs in white, promising nothing but offering the possibility of something new. I want to know them, Margaret said suddenly. Lily and Connor, not just the surface stuff. I want to know what makes them laugh, what scares them, what they dream about. I want to be a grandmother, not just a stranger they visit once a year. Emily studied her. That means being vulnerable. Kids can smell performance a mile away. They need real. I'm terrified of real. I know. Me too. Emily reached over and squeezed Margaret's hand. But maybe we can be terrified together. Margaret squeezed back, feeling the warmth of her daughter's skin, the reality of connection she'd denied herself for so long. I'd like that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the tree, letting the possibility of something new settle between them. Margaret thought about Rose, her grandmother, and the way she'd loved without armor. Maybe it wasn't too late to learn. Mom, Emily's voice was tentative. Tomorrow, can we do something different? Not the usual coordinated meal and polite conversation. What did you have in mind? I don't know, something messy. Let the kids help make cookies, even if they destroy the kitchen. Play games, even if someone cheats. Tell stories about Dad, the real ones, not just the sanitized versions. Margaret felt the old resistance rise, the need to maintain control, to keep things perfect, but she pushed against it, forced herself to sit with the discomfort. Okay, Margaret said. Messy it is. Emily smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. You might even enjoy it, or have a minor panic attack. Probably both. They laughed, and it felt like something unlocking. Margaret realized she couldn't remember the last time she and Emily had laughed together. Not the polite chuckle at an acceptable joke, but genuine shared joy. I missed you, Margaret said. Not who I wanted you to be. You, the real you. I missed you so much, Em. Emily's eyes glistened. I missed you too. Or at least I missed having a mom I could be real with. You have one now. I can't promise I'll be good at it, but I'm here. Actually here. Emily leaned her head on Margaret's shoulder, and Margaret wrapped her arm around her daughter, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the weight of her body, solid and real, and finally close. They sat like that until Emily's breathing evened out and Margaret realized she'd fallen asleep. She didn't move, didn't want to break the spell. Outside, the snow continued falling, covering old scars with clean white, promising nothing but offering the possibility of something new. Margaret looked at the tree, at the snowflake ornament catching the light. 30 years it had waited in darkness. 30 years she'd waited to come home to herself. Better late than never. Christmas morning arrived with the chaos as Emily had promised. Lily and Connor thundered downstairs at 6:30 a.m., woke the adults with gleeful shouts about Santa, and immediately began tearing through their stockings. Margaret, groggy and disoriented, almost asked them to slow down, to be more careful. But Emily caught her eye and smiled, and Margaret bit her tongue. Let them be kids. Let them make noise. Let them exist without constraint. David made breakfast while Emily supervised the present carnage. Margaret sat in her armchair, watching Lily squeal over an art set. Connor built an elaborate Lego scene across the entire living room floor. There was wrapping paper everywhere, sticky fingerprints on the coffee table, and she felt her chest tighten with the old anxiety about mess and order and control. Then Connor looked up at her, his face bright with joy. Grandma, look, it's a whole city with a fire station and everything. And something in Margaret softened. It's wonderful, Connor. You're very talented. He beamed and went back to building. That easy, that simple. She'd been invited into his world, and all she'd had to do was show up and see him. Later, they made breakfast together, scrambled eggs and bacon and slightly burned toast because Lily insisted on helping and Margaret let her. The kitchen became a disaster zone of eggshells and spilled milk, and Margaret found herself laughing when Connor accidentally launched a piece of bacon across the room with her fork. Sorry, Grandma. No harm done. Grab a paper towel. David watched from the doorway, coffee mug in hand, something soft in his expression. When Margaret caught her eye, Emily mouthed, "Thank you." Margaret just nodded, not trusting herself to speak. This was what family felt like. Not curated, not performed, just real. After breakfast, they decided to make cookies together. Margaret pulled out Rose's recipe cards, snickerdoodles, chocolate chip, Russian tea cakes, and laid them on the flour-dusted counter. These were my grandmother's recipes, she told Lily and Connor, your great-great-grandmother Rose. She was an amazing baker. Did she teach you? Lily asked, already elbow-deep in measuring cups. She tried. I was too worried about getting flour on my clothes to really enjoy it. Margaret smiled ruefully. I wish I'd paid better attention. They baked for hours, the kids taking turns with the mixer, sneaking chocolate chips, arguing over who got to roll the dough. Margaret let them. She helped when asked, demonstrated techniques when needed, but mostly she just let them experience the joy of creating something, even if it was messy and imperfect. Emily worked beside her, and at one point their hands brushed, reaching for the same measuring cup. They both froze, then smiled. This is nice, Emily said quietly. It's terrifying, Margaret admitted. but yes, nice. When the cookies came out of the oven, some burned, some underbaked, many misshapen, they all gathered around the cooling racks and sampled them still warm. Connor declared his chocolate chip cookie the best thing ever, despite it being more chocolate than cookie. Lily carefully arranged hers on a plate to photograph for her art portfolio. Margaret bit into a snickerdoodle and tasted her grandmother's kitchen, her own childhood, the love she'd been too controlled to fully accept. It tasted like coming home. "Mom," Emily touched her arm, "you okay?" Margaret wiped her eyes, surprising to find them wet. "Yes, very okay. I was just remembering Rose. She would have loved this, all of it." "Tell us about her," David suggested, "the real stories." So Margaret did. She told them about Rose's tiny house that always smelled of cinnamon and coffee, the way she'd sing opera while doing dishes despite having a terrible voice, how she'd let Margaret paint the bathroom walls when she was 6 because art is more important than pristine surfaces. "She sounds fun," Lily said, "like Mom." Margaret looked at Emily, saw the tears in her daughter's eyes, and nodded. "Yes, exactly like your mom." They spent the afternoon playing board games, Monopoly that devolved into chaos when Connor kept making up rules, Pictionary where David's drawings were hilariously terrible, Scrabble where they allowed made-up words if they sounded good. Margaret found herself relaxing into the disorder, laughing when she lost, celebrating others' victories without that old bitter edge of competition. At one point, Lily climbed into Margaret's lap unselfconsciously, leaning back against her as David took his turn. Margaret wrapped her arms around her granddaughter, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart. This child barely knew her, yet trusted her completely. The gift of that trust felt enormous. "Grandma," Lily said softly, "I like your house. It feels cozy now." "Now?" "Before it felt like a museum, but today it feels like people actually live here." Out of the mouth of babes, Margaret kissed the top of Lily's head. "That's the best compliment I've ever received." Dinner was ham sandwiches and leftover cookies because no one wanted to cook a formal meal. They ate in the living room, paper ballots balanced on laps, crumbs on the couch, and Margaret didn't care. Emily caught her eye over Connor's head and smiled, a real smile, full of hope and possibility. After the kids went to bed, the adults sat around the tree with Irish coffees David had made. The snowflake ornament caught the light, still imperfect, still beautiful. "Thank you for this Christmas," Emily said. "I know it wasn't easy for you." "It was the easiest thing I've ever done," Margaret replied, "and the hardest, but mostly it was right." David raised his mug. "To new traditions." "To showing up," Emily added. Margaret lifted her own mug. "To being imperfect together." They clinked glasses. The sound rang out in the quiet room, a bell signaling something beginning. "I want to do this more," Margaret said suddenly. "Not just Christmas. I want to visit you in Seattle, have you come here in summer, and actually be part of your lives." "We'd like that," David said gently. "The kids have been asking about it. They want to know their grandmother." "I want that too. I want—" Margaret's voice cracked. "I want to not waste what time I have left. I'm 72. I don't know how many years I get, but I want them to matter." Emily set down her mug and moved to sit beside Margaret on the couch. "They'll matter, Mom. We'll make sure they matter." Margaret leaned into her daughter, feeling the solidity of her, the warmth. "I love you, Em. I should have said it more, said it better, but I love you so much." "I love you too, Mom." They held each other while David discreetly busied himself clearing mugs. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving Cleveland blanketed in pristine white. The street was silent, except for the occasional car passing, headlights cutting through the darkness. Margaret thought about that garage box, about all the years she'd kept the ornament hidden because she couldn't face what it represented. But things hidden didn't disappear, they just festered, grew heavier, built walls. She'd spent 30 years performing perfection, and it had cost her everything that mattered. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to learn a different way. "Hey," Emily said softly, "what are you thinking about?" Rose, and how she told me once that the bitter is what makes you remember. I didn't understand what she meant then. And now? Now I think she meant that the hard things, the painful things, they're what teach us. The sweetness is lovely, but it's the bitter that changes us. Margaret looked at the snowflake ornament. I'm glad I kept it, even though looking at it hurt. It reminded me of what I'd lost, and that meant I couldn't completely forget. Emily followed her gaze. It's funny, I'd almost forgotten about that ornament until today. I'd buried it along with so many other memories. Was that easier, forgetting? Safer, Emily corrected, but not easier. You can't selectively forget, Mom. When I buried the painful memories, I buried the good ones too. I forgot about making that ornament, how proud I was, how much I loved you, despite everything. Margaret's breath caught. You loved me? Of course I loved you. I never stopped. I just stopped showing it because it hurt too much when you couldn't see it. They sat with that truth between them, heavy and real, and somehow hopeful. Love hadn't died, it had just gone underground, waiting for permission to surface again. I see it now, Margaret whispered. Your love. I see it in how you parent your kids, how you built a life that's the opposite of what I modeled. You took all that pain and turned it into something beautiful. That takes strength I never had. You have it now. I'm learning, with your help. Emily kissed her cheek, a gesture so simple and profound that Margaret's eyes filled again. She was crying a lot today. Maybe that was okay. Maybe tears were just another form of truth, washing away the calcified layers of pretense. David returned with more Irish coffee, and they talked late into the night about Richard, about Seattle, about Margaret's book club, and Emily's latest photography project. Real conversation, meandering and imperfect, full of laughter and a few more tears, and the comfortable silences that come when people actually know each other. At some point, Margaret realized she was happy. Not the thin, brittle satisfaction of a perfectly executed event, but genuine contentment. She was sitting in a messy living room with her daughter and son-in-law, drinking whiskey-laced coffee, talking about nothing and everything, and she was happy. When had she felt this way before? Before Richard died? Before Emily moved away? Or had she ever felt this at all? This sense of being fully present, fully alive, fully herself without apology. Maybe this was new. Maybe at 72, she was finally learning how to live. The rest of the visit passed too quickly. They spent Boxing Day building a snowman in the backyard. Connor insisted it needed a bacon nose instead of a carrot, and then driving around looking at Christmas lights. They played more games, told more stories, made more cookies. Margaret taught Lily how to crochet, something she hadn't done in years, and was surprised by how much she enjoyed it. Emily photographed everything: the messy kitchen, the Lego city covering the floor, Lily concentrating on her crochet, Connor's gap-toothed grin. For our memory, she said, so we don't forget this Christmas. I could never forget this, Margaret replied. Their last evening, after the kids were asleep, Margaret gave Emily the box from the garage. What's this? Emily opened it, finding not just the snowflake ornament, but other items Margaret had packed away: Emily's report cards, drawings from elementary school, the program for that disastrous Christmas pageant, photos of her at various ages. "Things I couldn't look at because they reminded me of my failures," Margaret said. "But they're yours, your history. I want you to have them." Emily sifted through the contents, pausing on a photo of herself at 9, holding the snowflake ornament, beaming at the camera. "I remember when Dad took this, right after I finished making it. I was so proud." "You should have been. It's beautiful." "It's lopsided and half the glitter fell off." "That's what makes it beautiful," Margaret said firmly. "It's real. It's you. And I'm sorry I couldn't see that then." Emily carefully repacked the box, then set it aside and hugged Margaret, a long, tight embrace that said more than words. Margaret held her daughter and thought about all the years she'd been too armored to really hold her, to let herself be held. "Thank you, Mom," Emily whispered, "for this Christmas, for showing up, for trying. Thank you for giving me another chance. We're giving each other another chance." They pulled apart, both teary-eyed, both smiling. David appeared with a bottle of wine and 3 glasses, and they spent the evening planning future visits: Easter in Seattle, maybe the 4th of July in Cleveland, definitely next Christmas wherever they wanted to be together. The next morning, Margaret stood on the porch and waved as they pulled away, their car packed with gifts and cookies and that box of memories. Lily and Connor pressed their faces to the rear window, waving frantically. Emily blew her a kiss. Margaret caught it, held it close, and waved until they turned the corner and disappeared. Then she walked back into her house, messy and lived in and perfect, and stood before the tree. The snowflake ornament hung at eye level, catching the morning light. She'd kept it for 30 years in darkness. Now it would hang in her living room all year long, a reminder of what she'd almost lost and what she'd found again. The following week, Margaret did something she'd never done before. She called Emily without planning what to say, without an agenda or schedule to coordinate. "Hey, Mom," Emily answered, surprise evident in her voice. "Everything okay?" "Yes, I just wanted to talk to you, hear your voice. Is this a bad time?" "No, it's perfect. Hold on." Muffled sounds, then Emily's voice clearer. "Okay." I stepped outside. Connor's Lego phase has gotten extremely loud. Margaret smiled. "Tell him her grandmother says the noise means he's creating something important." Emily laughed. "I will. So what's up? Are we coordinating New Year's plans or—" "No plans. I just missed you." Silence. Then Emily's voice softer. "Really?" "Really. Is that okay? Can I just call sometimes? Not for a reason, just to talk?" "Yes, God, yes. I'd love that." So they talked about nothing important: Emily's grocery shopping mishap, Margaret's book club drama, the weather, their respective coffee habits. It was ordinary and wonderful, and felt like what Margaret imagined normal mothers and daughters did. When they hung up an hour later, Margaret felt fuller somehow, as if she'd been operating at half capacity for years and was finally waking up. She walked to the living room and stood before the tree. In a few days, tradition dictated she should take down the decorations, pack everything away, return the house to its neutral state. But Margaret found she didn't want to. Not yet. Maybe not even on a schedule. The snowflake ornament caught the afternoon light, sending tiny rainbows across the wall. Imperfect, lopsided, precious. A reminder that the best things in life don't need to be curated or controlled. They just need to be seen. Margaret touched the glass gently. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was thanking: the ornament, Emily, Rose, the universe that had given her this second chance. Maybe all of them, maybe herself, for finally being brave enough to try. Outside, new snow began to fall. Margaret watched it through the bay window, feeling no urge to worry about the driveway or the walkway or anything that needed managing. She just watched the snowfall, coating everything in fresh white, and felt something she'd almost forgotten existed: peace. The tree would stay up a little longer. The house would remain slightly messy. She'd call Emily again tomorrow for no reason except that she wanted to. And that snowflake ornament would hang there all year long, not hidden away, not forced into coordination, just existing exactly as it was meant to be, front and center, where love had always belonged.